and maybe that you may be a target.
Well, I haven't said that I may be a target. People have asked me if I mean, there's always, for anybody who runs for president.
Anybody who's on Fox is a target, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
so, you know, I think I've taken a lot worse risks in my life than running for president. So
But it's also got to be hard. You lost your uncle, you lost your father. I mean, that's horrible.
yeah, but what are you saying? Are you?
No, so why do you think that our government could be involved in
Oh, well,
this
you know,
evidence?
listen, when the Warren Commission, obviously, which was run by Alan Dulles, who was the head of the CIA, who my uncle fired, found that it was a lone shooter, which was Lee Harvey Oswald. But when Congress, a congressional committee, reinvestigated between 1977 and 1979 the House Select Assassinations Committee, they concluded, and they saw a lot more documentation and had a lot more witnesses than the Warren Commission ever saw. They concluded that my uncle was killed by a conspiracy. And most of the people, for example, Richard Schweitzer, who was the head of the committee, publicly said JFK, the President of the United States, that the CIA was involved in the murder of the President of the United States. And that's quotation. Most of the people on that committee at that time believed that it was the CIA, that it was believed certain people in the CIA.
You were 7 at the time? 7 or 8?
I was 10 when my uncle was killed. I was 14 when my father was killed. You know, and today there is overwhelming evidence. I mean, in fact,
why don't the government needs to
you know,
release all of the files on it and be transparent, let us see the information.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. There's still, you know, the law requires, there's a law that requires that all of the records of John Kennedy's assassination be released to the public 10 years ago. So they're still holding 5,000 documents. President Biden promised when he was elected that he was going to release those documents. President Trump promised that he would, but the CIA doesn't want them to. And so the question that I think Americans have a right to ask, including members of, you know, my father and uncle's family, is why not? What is it that you don't want to see 60 years later? And by the way, the last tranche of documents released had documentation in there that finally got even the New York Times to admit that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA asset, that he was working for the CIA. So, if the Warren Commission had known that back in 1964, they would have had a very different time. And the House Assassinations Committee never knew that. That was released. You know, we've known that we've had documentation, have known that at least a decade. But some of that documentation became overwhelming in this last tranche, and finally the mainstream media acknowledged that, yeah, he had this relationship with the CIA going back to 1957 or 1958.
We have a minute left in this hour.